You ever felt like the more you care, the more he pulls away? Like the harder you try, the less he seems to notice? Let me guess. You text first. You check his social media stories. You wait for replies that come too late, or not at all. And deep down, there's this gnawing fear. If I pull back, will he forget about me? Will he stop caring? But what if that belief, the one telling you love is about constant effort, chasing, overgiving, is the very thing keeping you stuck, unseen, and emotionally exhausted? Here's the uncomfortable truth most women never hear. The more available you are, the less valuable you become in his eyes. That's not cruel. It's human nature. It's how the psychology of desire actually works. And yet so many of us have been conditioned to believe the opposite, that if we just love harder, if we just try more, they'll finally see our worth, but they don't. And it's not because you're not worthy. It's because you've been showing up in a way that makes them take you for granted. So let's flip this. Let's reframe everything you thought you knew about attraction. Because when you understand the power of pulling back, not as a trick, but as a form of self-respect, you begin to unlock something that changes the dynamic completely. This isn't about playing games. This is about embodying presence, stillness, and inner certainty. This is about learning what real feminine magnetism looks like when paired with the grounded clarity of stoicism. This is love stoic. Let me ask you something. What if the very silence you're afraid of is actually your most powerful move? What if pulling back doesn't make him forget you, but forces him to feel your absence so deeply he can't ignore it? And what if in the process you stop needing his attention altogether and start attracting it effortlessly? This is where we begin. And trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you've been taught about connection, desire, and your own power in relationship. Because once you understand what ignoring him actually does, not just to him but to you, you'll never chase again. You'll never beg to be seen. You'll walk differently, talk differently, choose differently. So stay right here. Don't blink, because what's coming next, that's the part that flips the entire script. Let's get into it. 1. Scarcity creates value. You become the prize. In a world where silence holds more weight than words, we find ourselves drawn to the paradox of presence. What does it mean to be missed? What does it take for a man to feel your absence so deeply it unsettles his entire emotional rhythm? Scarcity creates value not just in economics but in love, in attention, in the unseen energy between two people. And yet most women operate from a space of fear. The fear that if they're not constantly available, constantly initiating, constantly proving, they'll be forgotten. This fear is the very mechanism that keeps them in the loop of overgiving. Let's break this down through the lens of stoicism, through the lens of emotional discipline, clarity, and inner peace. Have you ever noticed how a luxury brand never has to advertise itself aggressively? The brand knows its worth. It knows its rarity, and it knows that the right people will pursue it. Not because it's loud, but because it's limited. When you're always available, emotionally wide open, and constantly offering your time, your affection, your attention, you dilute your own value. You become like background music, always playing, always there, and eventually unheard. Think about the psychology here. What do we tend to chase as humans? We chase what we feel we might lose. We pursue what we cannot fully grasp. And when it comes to attraction, a man's interest isn't sustained by what he already has on a silver platter. It's ignited by what he fears he may not have access to. This isn't manipulation. It's human nature. It's the same primal trigger that makes someone chase a dream, a goal, or an ideal. They are drawn not to its availability, but to its exclusivity. Now here's where love stoic comes in. Not as a tactic, but as a way of being. Stoicism teaches you to control what you can and detach from what you cannot. To stay grounded in your value, regardless of external outcomes. So when you begin to embody that mindset in dating, you're no longer reactive to his breadcrumbs, his delayed replies, or his hot and cold behavior. You're rooted. You become that rare presence that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't need validation because you've already validated yourself. But let's go deeper. What happens internally when you shift from being endlessly available to intentionally scarce? You start reclaiming your time, your focus, your energy. You start making decisions from a place of alignment, not attachment. Suddenly, your energy isn't scattered. It's directed inward toward your growth, your peace, your purpose. And trust me, men can feel that shift. It's in your tone, in your posture, in the way you don't rush to fill silences or accommodate bad behavior. It's in the way you say less but mean more. And yes, it confuses them at first, especially if they're used to having you orbit around their convenience. But confusion leads to curiosity, and curiosity leads to pursuit. That's when you flip the entire dynamic, not by pretending to be hard to get, but by genuinely becoming someone who no longer gives herself away so easily. The idea that love should be freely given is noble. Yeah, but when it's not reciprocated, when it's not respected, when it's poured into someone who hasn't earned it, it becomes emotional charity. And you're not a charity, you're not an emotional buffet offering unlimited access. You are the main event. You are the invitation on experience. And here's the thing, men know this kind of energy when they feel it. They may not articulate it in words, but they recognize its weight. It lingers when you're gone. It echoes in the space where your constant texts used to be. It hums beneath the surface of their thoughts as they check their phones and realize there's nothing from you. That's silence. That's power. That absence. That's presence. So let me ask you, how much have you diluted your own value just to feel chosen by someone who never had to earn you? How often have you shown up in spaces that didn't deserve your time, your softness, your attention, all because you feared being forgotten? And now ask yourself this, what would happen if you reclaimed that attention, turned it inward, and let the silence speak for you? The answer isn't in giving more, it's in giving less, but with intention. And this is where the Stoicism mindset rewrites your story. It teaches you that strength isn't loud, it's quiet. It's not in the chasing, it's in the knowing. The knowing that you are not meant to be accessible to everyone. The knowing that your value is not diminished by someone else's inability to recognize it. The knowing that when you pull back, when you stop being so easy to reach, you become unforgettable. You become the woman who respects her energy so deeply, she doesn't waste it convincing anyone to stay. This is the woman he can't ignore, not because she's playing games, but because she's playing a different game altogether. The game of self-respect, the game of emotional mastery, the game of love stoic. So what does scarcity look like in practice? It looks like not replying right away, not to be rude, but because you have a life. It looks like not saying yes to every last-minute plan, not to punish, but because your time is valuable. It looks like staying silent when you're upset. Instead of sending long emotional messages, you sit with your feelings, you reflect, and you choose your words with precision. It looks like being calm when he tries to test you emotionally or mentally, because your peace is non-negotiable. And here's the most powerful part. The moment you stop showing up out of fear is the moment you start showing up from power. And in that power, everything changes. He can't ignore you, not because you're louder, but because your silence holds weight. He can't take you for granted, not because you demand it, but because your absence commands it. He can't play games, not because you retaliate, but because you're simply not available for anything less than clarity and consistency. Love stoic isn't about detaching from love. It's about detaching from fear. It's about creating enough space for real connection to emerge. Not one built on your constant emotional labor, but one that's mutual, intentional, and rooted in respect. This first shift, understanding that scarcity creates value, isn't just a mindset, it's a transformation. It's the doorway to becoming the kind of woman who no longer proves her worth, but lives it. So the next time you're tempted to reach out first, to send that follow-up text, to over-explain, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I moving from power or from fear? Because once you understand that real magnetism comes from stillness, not struggle, you'll stop trying to earn his attention and start embodying the woman he'll never forget. 2. Your silence triggers his curiosity. There's something deeply unsettling about silence, isn't there? When someone you were used to hearing from suddenly stops speaking, you don't just move on. You start to wonder what happened. Why did they go quiet? Are they upset? Have they moved on? That quiet space becomes a breeding ground for curiosity, insecurity, and reflection. And when you're the one creating that space, you're no longer chasing, you're commanding attention without saying a word. This is where the mystery begins. This is where stoicism becomes magnetic. Because when you stop over-explaining, when you stop reacting to every small shift in his behavior, he starts to lean in. He starts noticing the lack of your presence and begins to question what it means. That space you've left behind, it's no longer empty. It's powerful. The mind hates a vacuum. The more he can't read you, the more he's drawn to you. The more he can't predict your next move, the more you're on his mind. Why? Because human psychology is wired for clarity. We obsess over what we don't understand. And when you were constantly responding, constantly expressing, constantly making it easy for him to read you, there was no mystery, no tension, no chase. But the moment you go silent, the moment you stop giving him the emotional roadmap, his mind starts to wander and wonder, did I lose her? Is she upset? Has she met someone else? It's no longer about you chasing answers. It's about him chasing certainty. And when a man is uncertain about where he stands with you, he starts behaving differently. He starts checking your social media, rereading old messages, replaying memories in his mind. He becomes the one analyzing. He becomes the one waiting. Because when your presence was predictable, it was comfortable. But now your absence has made you unforgettable. And here's the twist. You're not even doing anything. You're just not doing what you used to. You're no longer filling every silence. You're no longer reacting to his breadcrumbs. You've shifted, and that shift is loud. It says, I no longer need to explain myself. I no longer need to change. And that silence, that calm, grounded energy, that's what haunts him. That's what lingers long after your last message. But let's talk about what's really happening beneath the surface. See, when you go quiet, it's not just about withdrawal. It's about returning to yourself. It's about stepping out of emotional overfunctioning and reclaiming your peace. Because if every interaction with him was leaving you drained, anxious, or overthinking, then silence becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the place where you remember who you are before you started giving so much of yourself away. This is stoicism in action. It's the radical decision to pause, to be still, to not let his inconsistency dictate your emotional climate. And in that stillness, you find your power. You stop spinning, you stop reacting, you stop needing, and that's the energy shift he wasn't expecting. The woman he used to predict is now an enigma. The one who used to text first, ask questions, overgive, she's not there anymore. And what's left is silence, distance, and the unmistakable feeling of her absence. That absence, it's louder than anything she could have said. Because here's the secret. Most men don't actually process through words. They process through space. They process through the absence of what they took for granted. When you're always there, always talking, always explaining, he never has a reason to reflect. But when you remove yourself, he's forced to notice what's missing. He's forced to face the emotional gap that your silence created. And the deeper that gap feels, the more he starts to realize your impact. Have you ever had a favorite song you played on repeat until you stopped noticing it? It faded into background noise, but then one day you don't hear it anymore, and suddenly you miss. That's what happens when you go quiet. You're no longer the background noise in his day. You become the song he plays in his head, the one he's trying to find again, the one he can't forget. But here's the challenge and the invitation. Can you hold that silence? Can you stay in that calm, neutral space without breaking it just to seek reassurance? Because that's where most women falter. The urge to check in, to see if he noticed, to get some kind of reaction. But the moment you reach out first, the moment you feel the silence, the power you reclaimed begins to leak, not because you're weak, but because you gave in to the fear that silence equals being forgotten. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches that silence is not the absence of power, it's the embodiment of it. That emotional control is the highest form of self-respect. So ask yourself, what if this silence is the very thing that forces him to grow up, to step up, or to finally recognize your worth? What if your absence is what teaches him your value, not because you wanted to punish him, but because you finally stopped overcompensating? What if this pause isn't the end, but the beginning of a new dynamic, one built, not on fear but on mutual effort and emotional maturity? This is what Love Stoic is all about. It's not passive, it's not manipulative, it's not a trick, it's the decision to withdraw from the noise, to anchor into yourself, and to let that quiet speak louder than words ever could. And let's be honest, Hasn't the noise exhausted you? The overthinking, the second guessing, the trying too hard. It wears you down. So consider this your reset, your opportunity to no longer respond out of habit or fear, but out of clarity and alignment. And if he doesn't come closer, if he doesn't notice, if he doesn't feel your absence, that's your answer, because silence reveals the truth. It exposes what words have concealed. And you, my love, deserve the kind of love that doesn't need to be chased, that doesn't fall apart when you stop initiating. So here's your moment. Sit in your power. Let the silence do the work. Let curiosity pull him toward you. Let the mystery unsettle him. Not because you wanted to play games, but because you finally stopped playing yourself. And if you're feeling this shift, if you're ready to become the woman he can't stop thinking about, if you know it's time to stop talking and start allowing, then this message is for you. Like this video, if it's speaking to your soul, and drop a comment saying number 1, if you've ever experienced the power of silence, and if you want more powerful tools to embody confidence, emotional control, and real feminine attraction, subscribe right now. Because in the next part, we're going even deeper into how your energy shift changes the entire game. This is Love Stoic. This is your time. 3. Energy shift from him to you. Something extraordinary happens the moment you stop pouring your energy into him and begin reclaiming it for yourself. At first it feels foreign, unfamiliar, even lonely. You're used to checking your phone, analyzing his replies, wondering what he meant. But now, instead of investing all that energy outward, you turn it inward. You start asking new questions. What do I want? How do I feel when I'm not constantly waiting for him? What lights me up? What brings me peace? And in those questions, you find something you hadn't expected. Freedom. Not because he changed, but because you did. This is what stoicism in love looks like. Not coldness, not detachment, but clarity. When you shift your energy away from him, you're no longer reacting to his inconsistency. You're creating consistency within yourself, and that's what makes you magnetic. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not your effort, not your chasing, but your peace. Think about, when was the last time you felt fully in your body, present in your own world, not consumed by what he's doing or not doing? That moment, that stillness is where your true power lives. When your energy is anchored in yourself, it no longer surges or crashes based on his action. You're not checking your phone 20 times an hour. You're not deciphering mixed signals. You're simply steady. And that steadiness, that's what makes a man stop in his tracks. Because most women are emotionally available to a fault, wearing their hearts on their sleeves, offering their warmth to men who haven't earned it. But a woman who knows how to hold her energy, how to contain her presence, how to not give everything away at once, that woman is unforgettable. She's the one he thinks about when the noise settles. She's the one who lives rent-free in his mind, not because she was loud or dramatic, but because she didn't need him to complete her. And when you become that woman, everything changes. Love Stoic teaches this balance. It's not about walls. It's about boundaries. It's not about apathy. It's about emotional discipline. You stop giving him the power to determine your mood. You stop handing over the keys to your peace. You begin to trust your own energy more than his attention. And slowly but surely, you start to glow differently. You begin focusing on things that bring you joy without needing an audience. You start moving differently. You eat better. You sleep better. You begin attracting new experiences, new people, new energy. Because the moment you stop revolving around him, your world expands, and he feels. Don't let the silence fool you. He feels it. He may not say it out loud, but he notices the difference. Your tone is calmer, your eyes are clearer, your responses are shorter, but more powerful. You're not rushing to reply, not trying to explain, not overcompensating anymore. You've entered a different frequency, and he's stuck wondering, what changed? Let him wonder, because this part of the journey isn't even about him anymore. It's about you. You've tasted the freedom of not needing validation to feel worthy. You've remembered who you were before you shrunk yourself to be chosen. And now that you've reconnected with that version of yourself, nothing else compares. So here's the question. Can you hold that energy? Can you stay in your glow even when he reaches out? Even when he sends that late night text or that just thinking about you message? Because this is the part where most women give it away. They feel the power. They feel the shift. But then they get tested. And they fold. They reply instantly. They open up too soon. They fall right back into the old cycle.
but not you, not this time, because you've learned that your energy is sacred, that your attention is a gift, that not everyone deserves access to you, especially not someone who only wants it when it's convenient, and that's the real Can you hold your power when he circles back? Can you keep your peace when he tries to disrupt it with breadcrumbs and half efforts? Stoicism teaches you not to react to every tug on your emotional sleeve. It teaches you to respond from alignment, not from lack. 2. Choose stillness over drama. And in relationships, that's a superpower, because the man who's truly meant for you will feel that depth. He won't be intimidated by your self-possession. He'll be drawn to it. He won't need to chase your energy. He'll earn it. So every time you feel tempted to break your own boundaries, pause. Ask yourself, is this action in alignment with my highest self, or is it a reaction to my old patterns? Am I moving from power, or am I moving from fear? Because every action is an energetic investment. And when you start investing in yourself, the way you used to invest in him, you begin to see returns that aren't just romantic, but spiritual. You sleep better, you breathe deeper, you create more, you receive more. Your life becomes not because someone filled it for you, but because you stopped draining yourself. That's the shift, that's the pivot, and that's what makes you radiant. This is what Love Stoic calls emotional sovereignty, the ability to hold your own emotional center, no matter who comes or goes. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely not needing their response to validate your worth. You're no longer playing emotional ping pong. You're not reacting to every little thing. You've reclaimed your calm, and now you become rare. In a world full of anxious chasers, your peace becomes irresistible. And yes, they feel the difference. The way you no longer wait, the way you no longer seek, the way you no longer break your own rules for the sake of closeness. It's like walking into a room and seeing someone who doesn't need anyone to look at her, but everyone does. That's you now. You don't chase, you attract. You don't perform, you embody. You don't beg, you choose. And men, they don't forget that kind of woman. She becomes a reference point.
She becomes the one he compares others to because she was different. She wasn't desperate. She didn't fold under pressure. She didn't hand over her power. She held it. And holding it, that's what changes the game. So if you're in that space right now where you've stopped chasing, where you're pulling your energy back, where it feels unfamiliar but also good, stay there. Stay with it. Because this is where the alchemy happens. This is where you stop being someone who overgives to be loved and start being someone who is loved because she no longer overgives. This is where the inner glow becomes stronger than any outer validation. This is where the energy shift becomes permanent. Love Stoic isn't just a moment, it's a way of being. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything. It's the stillness that moves people. It's the peace that pulls them in. And it begins the moment you stop giving him everything and start giving everything to you. 4. His ego takes the hit. When you stop reacting, when you stop showing up the way you used to, something unexpected happens. Not just inside of you, but inside of him. His ego takes the hit. And you may not see it at first because most men won't show it openly. But underneath the surface, he's rattled. Why isn't she texting me back? Why doesn't she seem affected anymore? Did she move on? That uncertainty unsettles him because for so long he held the upper hand. He knew you cared. He knew you'd respond. He knew how to trigger a reaction from you. And now the script has flipped. Now the silence is louder than any words. It breaks the cycle. It breaks the control. It breaks the ego that once relied on your constant presence to feel important. And when a man can no longer pull you in with the same tactics, he starts to feel a loss of power. That's not about love. It's about identity. It's about how much of his self-worth was tied to your attention. And when that attention is suddenly gone, when it's no longer guaranteed, it forces him to confront a terrifying question. Was I not as important to her as I thought? That seed of doubt, it grows because the truth is, he didn't expect you to change. He didn't expect you to stop trying. He didn't expect you to finally realize that his inconsistent effort wasn't worth your consistent emotional investment. And now that you're no longer there, now that your energy has shifted, his ego can't handle it. Because before it wasn't just about having you, it was about knowing he could have you. That knowledge made him feel powerful. That access kept him emotionally lazy. That dynamic allowed him to do the bare minimum and still keep you around. But now that comfort is gone, now you're not reacting to his silence with long paragraphs. You're not chasing after his affection. You're not asking where you stand. You've gone quiet, and your absence is exposing everything he refused to see when you were still there. He's realizing how much he relied on your effort to keep the connection alive. He's realizing how much space you took up in his emotional world. And more importantly, he's realizing that without your energy fueling the dynamic, there's nothing left for him to lean on. That's the hit to his ego. That's the moment he begins to panic. Not because he loves you, but because he lost the control he mistook for connection. And here's the beautiful part. You didn't have to do anything loud or dramatic. You didn't have to scream or beg or explain. All you had to do was stop. Stop giving. Stop chasing. Stop feeding his self-importance. And in that stillness, you became unforgettable. Because Stoicism teaches us that true strength is in restraint, in choosing stillness over reaction, in holding your ground when everything inside you wants to reach out. And that kind of self-control, that's what bruises the ego most. Because now he doesn't get to be the one who ends things. He doesn't get to ghost you and then come back whenever he wants. He doesn't get to be the puppet master of your emotions anymore. You've taken your power back, and his ego doesn't know how to handle that. But here's the part most women don't realize. When a man starts to feel his grip on you slipping, he'll test you. He'll throw out bait, a late night text, a like on your story, a half-hearted "I miss you." He's not coming from depth. He's coming from panic. He needs to know that he still has access to you, that he can still get a rise out of you, that you're still emotionally available even if he isn't. And that's your moment of truth. That's where you choose whether or not to hand him back the very power you worked so hard to reclaim. Because once his ego realizes it no longer controls you, it will do everything it can to regain that position. Not because he's ready to meet you where you are, but because his pride is hurting. And pride doesn't lead to love, it leads to manipulation. So you have to ask yourself, is this message from him rooted in sincerity or in ego? Is he really showing up differently, or is he just trying to feel powerful again? And most importantly, do you even want what you used to chase now that you've remembered who you are without it? Because that's the shift Stoicism brings. You stop confusing ego-driven attention with real emotional intimacy. You stop confusing control with care, and you begin to see him not for who you hoped he'd be, but for who he actually is. A man who only engaged when he had control. A man who only stayed when you made it easy. A man who only reached out when he feared losing his spot. Not because he feared losing you. And that truth, it stings, but it also sets you free, because now you're no longer trapped in the illusion. You're grounded, you're clear, centered in yourself. And that's where your power lives, not in his hands, but in yours. This is what Love Stoic stands for. The inner shift from emotional dependency to emotional sovereignty. The recognition that your energy is precious, and that anyone who wants access to it has to earn it, not manipulate it. And when his ego finally realizes that the version of you who used to give without boundaries is gone, that's when he starts to change. Not because he suddenly became a better man, but because the game changed, and he's not in control anymore. So if this part of the journey resonates with you, if you're feeling the shift and owning your energy like never before, then let it be known. Like this video and drop a number 1 in the comments if this truth hit home. And if you're serious about continuing this journey, if you're ready to stay in your power, not just visit it, then subscribe right now, because what's coming next will show you how to use this power, not just to attract but to decide to no longer hope he chooses you, but to ask if you choose him. This is just the beginning. This is Love Stoic 5. Ignoring reveals his true intentions. When you stop reaching out, when you stop being the one to always initiate, something becomes crystal clear. And it's not just how much effort you were putting in, it's how little effort he was. That silence you created, it isn't just a pause, it's a mirror. It shows you exactly where he stands. Because real connections don't disappear when you stop trying. People who truly care about you don't need to be reminded you exist. They don't vanish the moment your energy stops sustaining them. So when you go silent, when you no longer send the good morning texts, the check-ins, the long paragraphs explaining how you feel, you start to see everything more clearly. His absence in the silence reveals more than his words ever did. And that's what most women don't realize. Ignoring him doesn't just affect him. It awakens you. It sours you. It breaks the illusion
The illusion that he cared as deeply as you did. The illusion that he was just bad at communication, or going through the illusion that if you tried a little harder, gave a little more, were a little more patient, it would all work out. But silence has a way of slicing through that fantasy. It shows you what effort really looks like. It shows you what consistency really feels like. And if he disappears in that silence, if he makes zero effort to close the gap, if he doesn't even notice that you've gone quiet, that's your answer. Not the one you wanted maybe, but the one you need. Because if someone only stays when you're doing all the work, they were never staying for the right reasons. They were staying because you made it easy, because your love was accessible, because they never had to earn it. And when you take that access away, they don't fight for it. They just leave. That's not love. That's convenience. And you, my love, are not here to be convenient. You're not here to be a placeholder, or an option, or a backup plan. You're here to be chosen fully, seen clearly, and valued deeply. And anyone who can't meet you there, they don't belong in your space. This is what Love Stoic reveals. It's not a punishment. It's a practice of pulling your energy back, so you can see the truth without noise, without performance, without all the emotional clutter. Because the moment you stop speaking, the moment you stop trying, you see who really shows up. You see who leans in, and who fades away. And that clarity, it hurts, but it also heals, because now you're no longer operating on hope. You're grounded in reality. You're no longer projecting potential. You're seeing facts. And the fact is, if someone values you, they don't require you to carry the entire relationship on your back. They meet you. They match your effort. They communicate. They show up. And if they don't, then your silence wasn't the problem. It was the spotlight that exposed the truth. And here's where Stoicism becomes your greatest ally. It gives you the strength to sit with the discomfort of clarity, without running back to what's familiar. It helps you hold the space between illusion and truth, without collapsing into old habit. It reminds you that your peace is worth more than temporary validation. Because let's be real, how many times have you gone back, just because the silence was uncomfortable? How many times have you reignited a dead flame, because the loneliness whispered lies about your worth? How many times have you mistaken his return for love, when all it really was ego? The ego that missed your attention. The ego that wanted reassurance. The ego that didn't want to lose control. And every time you break the silence too soon, you rob yourself of that clarity. You re-enter the loop. You give him another chance to prove nothing has changed. But this time you won't, because now you've seen it. You've seen how little he tries when you stop trying. You've seen how fast he disappears when the effort is no longer one-sided. And that realization, it stings, but it frees you. It frees you from the burden of carrying both sides of the connection. It frees you from waiting on someone who was never truly present. It frees you from the need to prove your worth to someone who was never looking for it. And in that freedom you reclaim yourself. You reclaim your energy, your time, your focus. You pour it into people who reciprocate. You pour it into passions that ignite you. You pour it into a life that isn't waiting for someone to text you back. That's the real glow up. Not the one that's curated on Instagram, but the one that happens in your soul. The one that makes you walk differently, speak differently, choose differently. Because now you know. Now you trust yourself. Now you don't need his words to feel worthy. You have your own voice for that. Now you don't need his presence to feel seen. You see yourself now. You don't need his attention to feel valuable. You've assigned that value to yourself. And from this space you attract differently. You no longer entertain men who breadcrumb you. You no longer invest in connections that drain you. You no longer ignore red flags just to avoid starting over. Because now you're not afraid of silence. You embrace it. You trust it. You let it do the work that words never could. This is love stoic in motion. It's the grace of knowing when to speak and when to stay still. It's the wisdom of waiting to see if effort matches energy. It's the art of letting someone prove who they are when you're no longer trying to shape them. And when someone does show up in the silence, when they reach out, when they ask where you've been, when they notice the absence and feel the loss, you'll be able to tell if it's real. You'll know if it's love, or if it's just their ego responding to your boundary. Because now you see people clearly. Now you listen with your intuition. Now you respond with your values. And that discernment, that's priceless. It protects you from settling. It shields you from cycles. It saves you years of emotional burnout. All because you were brave enough to go quiet. All because you trusted yourself enough to let the silence reveal the truth. So no, ignoring him wasn't petty. It wasn't childish. It wasn't manipulative. It was necessary. It was the only thing left to do when words had failed. And now in the stillness, you see it all. Who he really is, who you really are, and how much you were always willing to give, until you weren't, until you remembered that love without effort isn't love at all. It's comfort, it's convenience, it's control. And you beautiful soul were never meant to be comfortable for someone who couldn't rise to meet you. You were meant to be chosen, not chased, not convinced, not tolerated, chosen. And now that you've seen the truth, you'll never accept less again. This is the power of stillness. This is the wisdom of stoicism. This is love. Stoic 6. The ultimate shift. You stop caring. There comes a moment in your journey where the silence no longer feels like a weapon. It feels like peace. Where the detachment is no longer forced. It's natural. You don't have to pretend you don't care. You genuinely don't. You've shifted. You've evolved. And what once had a grip on you now barely crosses your mind. That man who used to occupy every corner of your thoughts, every refresh of your messages, every hope tied to his next move. He's no longer the center of your world. Because when you stop caring, not out of bitterness but out of growth, everything changes. You don't get butterflies when he texts. You feel nothing. You don't stalk his socials. You don't even remember to check. You don't fantasize about closure. You've already created your own. And it's not that you're cold. It's not that you're heartless. It's that you finally returned home to yourself. You've realized that the version of you who clung, who waited, who acted, that was a version born from fear, from lack, from the belief that you had to chase to be chosen. But not anymore. You've reclaimed your wholeness. You've outgrown the need to be validated by someone who couldn't even show up consistently. And what's wild? That's when they come back. That's when they feel it. Because the energy that once reached for them, that once centered around them, is nowhere to be found. And suddenly, they're the one wondering. They're the one chasing. They're the one sensing that something precious slipped through their fingers. But here's the twist. You're not playing hard to get. You're not trying to make them regret anything. You've simply moved on. You're no longer driven by the need to be noticed. You've stopped watering dead plants. You've stopped rehearsing conversations in your head. You've stopped bending your boundaries for potential. And this inner peace, it didn't come easy. It came from nights spent overthinking. It came from the emotional withdrawal. It came from choosing silence over self-betrayal again and again. Until one day you woke up and realized, you're done. And the beauty of this shift is that it doesn't require revenge. It doesn't require a grand exit. It just requires you to stop giving your energy to things that drain you. That's the highest form of self-love. That's what Stoicism teaches us. You don't get attached to you don't resist reality. You allow people to reveal themselves. And when they show you who they are, you believe them. No anger, no resentment, just understanding. And that understanding births detachment. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to keep bleeding for someone who never even brought a bandage. And once you arrive here, everything else becomes so clear. You stop romanticizing confusion. You stop waiting on mixed signals. You stop seeing silence as rejection and start seeing it as redirection. You stop longing for the man who couldn't commit and start attracting one who can, because now you vibrate differently. You radiate peace. You become magnetic not because you're chasing, but because you're no longer available for anything that disturbs your soul. And the irony, that's what makes them miss you. That's what makes them spiral. That's what makes them show up out of nowhere. Because now the emotional access they took for granted is locked behind a door only. Self-worth holds the key. And it's not personal. It's just the law of energy. People always come back when you stop needing them to. But by then your standards have shifted. Your heart has healed. Your life has expanded. You've created a world so rich, so full, so grounded in purpose and presence, that anyone who wants to be a part of it has to rise to meet you. No more convincing, no more hoping, no more waiting, just receiving, just observing, just choosing. This is love stoic. The final shift, the point where you no longer live for someone's reaction, where your mood isn't determined by who texts first, where your joy isn't tied to the attention of someone inconsistent. And when you've truly embodied this, he can feel it. He can feel that he's no longer the sun you revolve around. He can sense that your energy now belongs to someone else, you. And trust me, that realization is louder than any silence you've ever given him. It's not about proving your worth anymore. It's about preserving it. It's not about seeking closure anymore. It's about becoming it. And the most powerful part, you're not angry. You don't hate him. You don't even need an apology. You've simply let go. You've evolved past the need to make sense of it. You've forgiven yourself for staying too long. And you've honored the lessons. But you're not repeating them. Because now your self-respect speaks volumes. Your peace protects your boundaries. Your standards guide your choices. And your energy. It's sacred. It's no longer up for grabs. So if this shift resonates with you, if you're feeling the power of indifference, not as numbness, but as transformation, then you already know you've won. Not because you made him miss you, but because you stopped missing yourself. And if this message awakens something in you, like this video, and drop a number 1 in the comments to own your growth. Subscribe right now to stay on this journey with me, because we're just getting started. This is what it means to love from power, to lead with presence, to embody love stoic. So here you are, no longer the woman who chases, who overextends, who waits by the phone hoping to be chosen. You've journeyed through silence, stillness, self-inquiry, and surrender. You've learned that